Tatzalach oikaloma. Good afternoon, everyone who's come today. It's so beautiful to see you all here today. My name is Beth Piatot. I am the director of the Arts Research Center, and I am so pleased to be able to welcome everybody here today to this conversation that we get to have with playwright Drew Woodson. It is especially joyful to welcome Drew back to UC Berkeley because we're very, very proud that Drew is an alum of UC Berkeley and is now a very successful playwright. And if you return to this very room tonight at 6 p.m., we will be having a staged reading of Drew's play From Above. That is free and open for everybody, and we welcome you. In fact, you could just keep your seats. Just leave, and just come right back and have these seats, because we have room for more to join us. I would like to introduce the program in which is sponsoring Drew's residency here at Berkeley. Drew is here with a program called the Indigenous Performing Arts residency, and it is a collaboration between the Arts Research Center, the Department of Theater, Dance, and Performance Studies on campus, and then we have a community partner, Alter Theater. And these three entities, we are working together and to establish this multi-year program in which we are making material and intellectual commitment to supporting Indigenous performing arts. And so over the past 2 years, we have brought the playwrights Dylan Cheeto and Blossom Johnson to work on their plays and perform their plays here. And then Drew is here this year with his play From Above. So I just want to recognize our partners, Theater, Dance, and Performance Studies, and also Alter Theater, and to remind everybody that it's not enough to make a land acknowledgement, because those are just words that may or may not mean anything, but that what matters is that we put our material and our material resources and also our intellectual and heart resources behind the work of Indigenous arts. I want to acknowledge with that our other partners, which include the Dean's Office of the Division of Arts and Humanities, the Department of Ethnic Studies, the Joseph A. Myers Center for Research on Native American Issues, the Native American Studies Program, the Puffin Foundation, and the California Arts Council. So with that, I want to introduce Drew and Patrick Russell. The three of us will be in conversation shortly. So Drew Woodson is a Western Shoshone playwright based in New York City. He has had his work read in multiple theaters across New York, including Rattlestick Theater, where he was asked to open the first annual Northeastern Native Arts Festival with his play, Your Friend, J. Silverheels. And here's where I get to editorialize, because I happen to know this. That play had its birth right across campus in the Department of Theater, Dance, and Performance Studies in a playwriting class with Phil Gatanda. That's not in the bio. This is all extra information you get for being here. For the same work, Drew was named Yale's Young Indigenous Playwright of 2021. More recently, Drew completed a 2-month artist residency on Governor's Island for the AICH, that's the American Indian Community House in New York City, and completed a workshop of new work From Above, which we'll be hearing tonight, under the direction of Madeline Sayet. As a writer, Drew seeks to tell stories where Native people are allowed to take up space, be complicated, and ultimately be more than a storytelling device. Drew is an MFA graduate from the Dramatic Writing Department at New York University and an alumni of UC Berkeley's Department of Theater, Dance, and Performance Studies. We'll be joined in conversation with Patrick Russell. Patrick Russell is a professional actor and director whose work has been seen in theaters across the Bay Area and is a continuing lecturer in the Department of Theater, Dance, and Performance Studies. As an educator, Patrick also teaches in American Conservatory Theater's Summer Training Congress and San Francisco semester, and has taught workshops at universities across the country as a recruiter and representative for ACT's training programs. Patrick has also taught for California Shakespeare Theater, Academy of Art University, Berkeley Rep, and most recently serves as the head of movement for Southern Oregon University's BFA in Acting program. He is also the co-founder of the Actor Space SF, a part-time professional actor training and performance center located in San Francisco. Patrick is a member of Artist Equity and SAG-AFTRA. He holds a BFA in acting from the University of California, Santa Barbara, and is a graduate of the American Conservatory Theater's Master of Fine Arts in Acting program. So please join me in a warm welcome for Drew and Patrick. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I get to do this part again. I've been at Berkeley for a while, and I had the joy of getting to know Drew because he took a class from me when he, I think, was a freshman or a sophomore. And then I got to see him in main stage productions in the theater department, but I also got to see him working in the Native community all the time. And I want to say I just really admire people who are so grounded in the community. And so, like, I remember one time running into him at a student recruitment event where he was serving food. And I'm like, aren't you on the main stage tonight? Like, don't you have other things you are doing? And he's like, yeah, but this is important. So I just want to acknowledge that Drew has been such an important part of these multiple communities at UC Berkeley, and also that your art just reflects such a deep commitment to Native people and telling Native stories. So I'm wondering if you could fill us in a little bit about your journey from graduating with a bachelor's from UC Berkeley, then going off to New York City and making it big.
Making it big. Well, Nananaha, hello. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you to Beth for being here. Thank you to Patrick for being here. This is very surreal, having graduated back in 2020. I was a pandemic graduate back at UC Berkeley. I started my Berkeley career back in 2015. And it had some really incredible moments at UC Berkeley, particularly with Beth Piatot and
I wrote that into his script.
Yes, that was part of it.
He delivered the line so well. Thank you, Drew.
Yeah, of course. And then I never got to work with Patrick. We actually did work. I took a class where Patrick came in as a guest and did a dance workshop with us, or a movement workshop with us. And everybody always wanted to take Patrick's class, and I really wanted to take Patrick's class, but I had already aged out of it, unfortunately. But yeah, so I'll just chat a little bit about what I've been doing, I guess. I graduated into the pandemic, and it was a really interesting time graduating in theater into the pandemic, where your whole career is based off of a medium where people need to be together in the same space, and then all of a sudden your career that you've spent 5 years training for is now all of a sudden on Zoom. So it was a very interesting time graduating at that point, and I'll say that to kind of give you an idea of the whole trajectory, I was writing this play, Your Friend Jay Silverheels, that I had started in Philip Gatanda's class at the time, and I was working on it for about 2 years at that point. And I was co-directing it with a very good friend of mine, Sala Megji, who's now also a wonderful playwright in New York City. And we were getting ready to put this play on. And had gotten funding from the Native American student organization that was on campus. We had gotten funding from another organization as well, and we were going to be putting it up at, if anybody knows, Laval's pizza place over on the other side of campus. They have a theater in the basement, which I don't know if it's still there, but they have a theater in the basement, and we were getting ready to put it on in the basement in Laval's theater. And then a week before we were supposed to open, classes got shut down and the whole campus got shut down, and then they just never reopened. So we had to do our whole big production that we were planning on Zoom. And at that point, you know, graduating into the pandemic, everything was really uncertain. Everybody was really unsure if they were going to have a career of what the world was going to look like, if the world was going to prioritize arts. You know, as both of you probably know, as many people may know, there was a lot of conversations of, well, is Zoom theater just going to be a thing now? You know, is Zoom acting going to be a new thing that we have to adapt for? You know, Zoom auditions became a big thing, which is Zoom auditions are still a thing. And so there was all these kinds of questions of like, well, now this is our whole career. What does this look like now? And for me, I had written a whole play that I was going to use to kind of launch myself going into grad school. And I was planning on that production kind of then creating a little bit of momentum in my career. And then all of a sudden that was just all gone. And then we were just inside for the next 2 years, basically. We were just, you know, as COVID hit and as COVID, you know, kind of locked everybody away, the people who graduated into it were all in the same boat together of being very uncertain. And so I just started writing. I started writing a lot more. I started just continuing to work on writing because that's something that you can do just in your own home. And just really trying to just keep momentum for myself, so that way I didn't become too relaxed or too caught up in everything that was happening at the time. And so I just kept writing and writing and writing, and eventually, through some wonderful contacts, I was able to submit and then win the Yale's Young Indigenous Playwright Playwright Festival of 2021, where I was then met some really incredible people at Yale, including Madeline Sayet, who you know, as well as a wonderful Native playwright named Tara Moses, as well as some just really incredible Native theater people who were all in the industry, who were all trying to figure it out together. And that gave me a lot of hope that things were going to be able to continue even after the lockdowns ended and even after, you know, COVID, which, you know, it took a long time, but it feels a little bit like we're getting finally back to somewhere where theater is really important and really vital. So after all that, I moved to New York City, just on the chance that things were going to get better. I didn't move for a job. I didn't move because I got in a big production or I got an agent or anything. Me and my partner, who is also an actress, and we were in a show together, and we knew that we wanted to be in New York and that was going to be the place for us. And so we just took a chance and we just moved. And it just fully was just based off of nothing. It was based off the possibility that there might be something waiting for us. And now we've been there for about 5 years. It's going very well for the both of us. New York City has been very, very kind to the both of us. I got my master's in dramatic writing from NYU. I just completed a 4-month residency that was started by Native playwright Mary Catherine Nagel, that took me from Nebraska to Oklahoma to Minnesota, and then just finished up the residency at Kansas City Repertory Theater in January. So I've been able to have some really incredible experiences, some really incredible career things, as well as artistic things that have happened all along the way. Really from that all started from the work that I was doing here at UC Berkeley.
Thank you so much, Drew. I want I actually want to go back to that moment where you're talking about, well, I could write by myself, and actually that's where things start with playwrights. But then, one of the things I've found so fascinating about the world of theater is how many people get involved in the making of a play. And so the playwright starts with their ideas, but then actors read it, and the dramaturge gets in on it, and the directors, and there are just so many parts of development that involve this huge team of people. So I'm wondering if I can invite both of you to weigh in now. And first, I would like you, Drew, to introduce your play from above a little bit. Take us back to the I'm by myself writing. What was your idea? How did it start coming together? And then I would like to hear Patrick, your experience. Patrick's one of the actors who's going to be reading tonight. And, I would like to hear you talk about the play too, and give us more of a sense of what it's like to be inside the play as an actor, and also the ways in which actors and directors shape something together, and writers. Sorry, how did I forget the playwright? Go ahead.
I'll just chat a little bit about the play itself. The play is titled From Above. It's about this church, this native Catholic church that's out in the middle of a desert, and a crisis that has befallen the church and the native Catholic people who are inside of it. And so, the idea really came from this. I had been struggling to find this a world for this idea of identity, the divided identity, because everybody here, has multiple identities that they at varying points put on and put out to other people. And I'd always been really curious about, we all have these different identities. We all identify as many things, but what is really the deepest part of that? What is the deepest layer that we subscribe to, or that we want to hold on to? Which then led to the idea of, what if you had to choose which identity was the closest one to you, and you had to let the other one go? And what if you had to what if you were forced to make that choice of choosing which part of you was the thing that you wanted to keep? So that then led to this whole kind of exploration of identity, of what it means to be a person of faith, what it means to be someone who is a part of the Catholic Church. That is a very specific kind of a religion. So what does it mean to be a person of faith? What does it mean to be a person in the Catholic Church? And what does it mean to be Native at the same time? And what does it mean to be Native in the United States? And with all the complications around identity there, because it's not just for people who know kind of Native, kind of tribal, enrollment kind of things. It's not just your identity. There's things that are attached to it. There's rules. There's methods of proving your identity, of blood quantum or lineage, or all these different types of things. And so the thing of the play is this native Catholic priest, this leader of this town, tells his congregation that they have to choose between their native identity or their Catholic faith, that they can't have both because of something that's happened in this town. And so then it just becomes an exploration of what that does to people when they are forced to choose. What choice do they make? What thing do they then latch onto? And that's really the whole crux of the play, yeah. And I think that answered the question. Did it? Okay.
Yeah, I guess. Well, to speak generally about like working on a play and then plays in development, it's always really fun. I mean, exciting and sometimes stressful, and we got kind of a time crunch to all work together and then present. And that stress can depend on like who's in charge and who's the playwright. Luckily Drew is incredible, and just the space that's being created in this particular workshop of being very deliberate and clear in the vision of what you've written, which is beautiful, while also being completely open and flexible, which is, what you want to have in collaboration. So it's great because there doesn't feel like a hierarchy in these kind of collaborative situations, which is so beautiful. And, you always wish we had a little bit more time to just but that's also a testament, to come back to the work that you've created, of something so nuanced as From Above, from your play, that there's so many layers to peel back. So to speak about the experience I'm having this week, it definitely, when you have something that makes you ask a lot of questions, and have these wonderful conversations and really get in, in depth with it all, it just makes it such a satisfying experience. I don't know how else to put it, but that's a testament to this play that hopefully you'll get a chance to see and hear tonight. And I also just it never ceases to amaze me. And as an actor, and primarily in director, and then we've talked a little, very briefly, about how I'm dabbling in playwriting, which gets into, it's so foreign to me about how to approach it. It never ceases to amaze me how, we rehearse till 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever it is. And then the next day, the playwright, like Drew here, comes in with stacks of new sections from the script. And two things I want to comment on that were amazing about how you approach it. It can either be we could spend hours figuring out how to fit these sections into the script we already have. But I think that was probably the clearest and most direction I've ever had, in terms of it goes here and then you cross this out. It's hard to explain, but it's a skill that's incredible that Drew had. But also just the sheer fact of how they hear what the actors do and what the director has asked of the actors, and then the next day come in and shape it based on what, the feedback that they get from the actors, and hearing it out loud, and how to sometimes streamline things. And that's amazing. And also to not seem like you just didn't sleep at all, but instead to be totally refreshed and here you guys go. I'm when did you do what? Huh?
I just rewrote half the play.
Yeah.
Here are the new pages.
Yeah, but so all to say, it's always an exciting process, and sometimes I feel really lucky to be a part of this process, especially because of why we only got a chance to do that one workshop years and years ago, which feels like many years ago because of the pandemic. I was so excited even before knowing I was going to be involved in this, knowing that you were coming here to present and work on your play. And then when I got a chance to possibly be a part of it, I was oh my God, it's always really satisfying to see a former student, even if it was just that one day, take off and fly and do amazing things. And so to be a part of that's really special, but also getting to see you at work, and your talent, and also your clarity and your openness is really beautiful. And that's what I think makes for beautiful plays and collaborations. And that's what brings it all together. So, yeah. Hopefully I answered that. I don't know.
Did you want to take a question?
Did I want to take a question?
Do you want to give a question?
Oh, do I want to? Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'll take, thank you. Sorry. I'm sorry. Oh my God, I have my little notebook here, but you started to touch on things that I was, kind of interested in. Because I was thinking about this and thinking about how the time that we crossed paths was when I started here. And then the pandemic, which is just a whole it actually, I have to also comment on this too. I hadn't been in this room since before COVID. And so I'm still I come in here because I used to teach in this room, and it's still kind of tripping me out a little bit because it's very different. It's amazing. But that time is just so, I think back on that, and I'm that seems so far ago, long ago. And yet not so much. But I'm going to start with this question. I know I was like thinking about it, but you spoke to a lot of like your journey. What would you tell your younger self, 5 years younger, senior year, Drew, like advice, like to think about, and in terms of any students here who are like going out into the world and thinking about this career?
Yeah. It's really quickly. It's so funny you talking about this room too, because the first ever acting class that I ever had was in this room back in 2015.
Yeah.
And it was, I believe, with Maura Tang at the time. It was a fabulous acting professor. And yeah, it looks very different. It looks a lot nicer, a little bit more spiffy. It's funny that thinking about that question, because in my job as I'm a youth education coordinator in New York City for the American Indian Community House, and we just had a panel with 5 Native professionals who were in very different fields. One of them was a park ranger in Central Park, and I asked them that question. And they all had very, very well-crafted and well-thought-of answers, and I'm trying to think of like, what would I tell myself? I think, graduating at that particular time, it was just so uncertain of like, what are we going to do now? And like, I remember that summer after I graduated, I did a Zoom play, because at that point too, I was still very much in both worlds. I was in the acting world and I was in the playwriting world. And I trained for 4 years to be an actor. So I was like really fully kind of in that acting world. And I did a Zoom play that was a adaptation of Hamlet, but it was from a different perspective or something like that. I can't remember quite. But I remember doing that Zoom play and just thinking, what am I doing? It was just so foreign to me, this thing. It was so different. And that was all we had, because we couldn't do shows. We couldn't, get jobs to be in a room with people to act or do stuff. And so I think I would just say to people who are graduating, or to myself who was graduating at the time, is that it's okay to take some time to figure it out. I think that's the thing. I thought that things needed to be really immediate after I graduated, that I needed to figure things out immediately, because you have all this stress of like, oh, I need to get a job. I need to find income. I need to get an apartment. I need to do all of these things. But what I learned really quickly is that you can do all of that, and all that stuff's important, but you can also take some time, and that life has a way of working itself out, where you can figure that stuff out, but you can also take time to figure out what you want, which is really how I figured out that I really wanted to write a lot more. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. I think that's great advice just in general for like taking time, at least, putting my teacher hat on and just like feeling the stress of all the students. For anybody here, is anybody here graduating? No? Visiting students? Yeah? Congratulations. And the stress of like, figure your life out. So I just personally appreciate that. Can I follow up with another question? I'm kind of jumping into those like big life questions, if that's okay. But I know I kind of alluded to this one. But I think it's safe to say, in general, a life of the arts, playwriting, directing, acting, anything in the arts is always kind of there's always questions about either for ourselves or outside, supportive, but influences about if this is the right thing, and so I guess, this kind of also gets into the times, right? That like we were having a conversation about how I think it's safe to say there's an effort to expressing, frankly, dismantling of the arts in many regards, and how we sort of deal with that and maneuver and navigate that. And also to anybody who may be influenced by this idea of what is the, to put it quite bluntly, like, what is the point if, this is getting in technology? Obviously, my stance, because I'm here and I teach here, and I fully believe in why we need but yeah, I just want to hear a little bit from you if you feel okay about jumping into why the arts today now.
Yeah, I'll say, are there any artists here? Any people who are interested in art? Great, yeah. I'll say that it's a really tough time right now because, funds may be getting cut for different art forms. I know some theaters have gone out of business, have shut down, not only here, but also in New York City, in Chicago, across the country. You hear about theaters who have been operating for decades and now being closed. And so then there's the question of, is this still a viable art form? Is this still a viable career to go into? And I'll just say that having now gone through, UC Berkeley and gone through NYU and now living in New York City, the answer is very much still yes. It is still very possible to have a very good career. It is just very hard. You have to work very hard at making it happen. And it won't happen for everybody. That's the other thing too, that not a lot of professors will tell you, but that it won't happen for every single person who pursues the arts to begin with, because it is so hard. And that's just the reality of it. But if you really work hard, if you really want it, if you really feel like it's the right thing to do, and you feel like you have something that you can add to it, then you will find a career. Because artists in general want to work with other artists who are passionate. And that's at every level. So even in New York City, I've had conversations and I've had meetings with people who are the executive director of a theater, and they also too, they make a lot of money. So there's also still money in these careers. But I've had conversations with them, and they just want to work with people who are passionate. That's really it. They want to work with people who are passionate and who are good people, and of course still good at their job. But the two first things there, really being passionate and being a good person, will really just get you so far in terms of having a career in the arts. And I don't think that's changed. I think that the world of artistry and of theater is maybe getting a little bit smaller, because these theaters are closing, because there's less funding. But that won't always be the case. I think that that's kind of the consensus that I've heard, is that there's hope and there's knowledge that this won't always be the kind of world that we're in, that eventually at some point there will be more funding for things. It's just a matter of finding your time to get into that career and finding your moment to get into the art form. Yeah.
Well, actually, I want to pick up on that question now. Oh, sorry, poor Drew is just getting it from both sides of it. Yeah. Well, talking about timing and talking about contraction or expansion, I just want to ask you specifically about being in the world of Native theater, because it does seem like even while there are these other moments of contraction or precarity, and certainly Native theater is not outside of that, but at the same time, it seems to be growing. It seems to be in a moment of expansion. And in fact, right now, Larissa Fasthorse has had these big shows on Broadway and LA, and now in DC. And so getting some really high profile, we're talking about one show, So we have this one show on Broadway. Right. But for us, that's a big breakthrough. That's a huge moment. Like that one show is a huge expansion for Native theater. So I'm wondering if you can reflect a little bit about what you've seen about maybe the expansion of Native theater and why, what kinds of things Native theater is bringing to the world. And I guess I would say there's also some, ripple effects or some convergences also happening in other media forms like television and movies. There's more Native representation, and even music and fashion industry. Like all of these areas, there's more visibility and more representation. So they seem to all be moving in a similar way. But so I just want to acknowledge that. While also asking you to speak specifically about like where you see Native theater going and what is unique about it.
Yeah, it really does feel like at this moment in time, Native theater is really expanding and really like it's been happening for a couple of years now. But it feels like it's been in the making for a long time because, Mary Catherine Nagel, who's, like I said, a wonderful Native playwright, she had a play at the Public Theater called Mannahatta, which originally had Lily Gladstone, who now is blowing up, of course, because of that movie. What was the name of it? Killers of the Flower Moon. But so that was many years ago now. And then they just did Mannahatta again at the Public a couple years ago, but that's been in the making for a long time. So it really feels like Larissa Fasthorse, Mary Catherine Nagel, Bill Yellowrobe, there's certain Native playwrights who have been kind of like pushing and pushing and pushing to where now within the past few years, it really feels like things are actually starting to happen, which is really exciting. And also to talk about you a little bit, you just had a wonderful production of your play, Antigone, at Native Voices at the Autry, which is the only equity Native theater in the country in LA. And it's a very big deal. They do a lot of really incredible Native work. And they just did a full production of your play, which is incredible because it's so incredibly hard to get a production done of Native theater. You're in the consciousness as well in all of these things. It's funny because when I'm in meetings or when I'm in conversations, we'll bring you up a lot in New York City. But it is expanding right now because there's, Blossom Johnson, who did this program last year, and then Dylan Chitto, who did the program 2 years ago. They're both still very much in the kind of theater consciousness across the country. And that's the same thing for, I hope myself, but also, Tara Moses, Madeline Sayet, all of these other really wonderful artists who are finally getting a little bit more of a chance to shine. And like this program that I just did, the Four Directions residency, which really, puts a lot of investment and money and time into one Native artist. They only choose one Native artist per year. And last year they did another wonderful playwright again, Madeline Easley, who has been doing incredible work across the country. And now we just chose our next Native playwright, who is, I don't know if I'm allowed to announce it, so maybe I won't, but is a wonderful playwright who's also having a similar kind of trajectory as the rest of us. And so we're all just, using the same ladder. We're all just helping each other up and, giving each other career possibilities and, helping each other climb to the kind of next rung of the ladder. And that's what it really feels like right now, is that there is a lot of momentum, specifically in Native theater, which I think is just really so important because Native theater just brings something just so different and exciting to the regular canon of American theater. It's when Native artists are talking about theater and when they're telling a story, we're talking about our home in some ways. Even if we're not talking directly about our home, we're talking about, home if we're talking about a place that's here, because we're the people who are from this place. We're the people who are from this land that we're on. So we have something that we can add to the theater kind of consciousness that's happening right now. And every Native artist is so different. Every single Native playwright that I've met has such a distinct style and voice, and they all have something completely different and interesting to add, which I also think is so important for people to realize that, every Native person is going to be different. Every Native tribe is going to be different, because we all have our different practices, and we all have a different language, and, all of these things. And so, yeah, it just feels really exciting, because it feels like finally, this is a generalization, so this doesn't apply everywhere, of course, but it does feel a little bit like we are being finally taken a little bit more seriously. And I just really hope that continues, because it really does feel like it's different from past times where there's been a bump of Native representation, then it kind of falls back down again. And then there's a bump, and then it falls back down again. But for right now, at least, it does feel like things are just kind of slowly building momentum.
Yeah, I think you're identifying so many of these important infrastructures that are necessary to have these kinds of representations. Because I think, you're describing these Native stories that are told by Native storytellers and actors and directors and institutions. They are nuanced because we're telling our own stories, and we know the people in the stories intimately. We know the problems intimately. And we also have these other artistic traditions to draw on, whether it's, they're just different aesthetics within a Native community that may come from a storytelling tradition, or may come from religious practices, or just what kind of people you are, whether you're from the Southwest or whether you're from the woodlands or whatever. Like, you just have a different kind of imaginary about what the world is, So I think that when we're able to create our own things, we can bring all that richness to the stage, and then there's an audience for it, because it's a whole world that's made. And I think that's just a really strong contrast to non-Native people making these flat representations of Native people. And I think that's, something I love in your bio, that you say, yeah, I'm writing against that, right? Because we are all familiar with that. Yeah.
And specifically, I was always really frustrated as an actor in that type of representation by non-Native writers. And so that's why I always try to play against it, to write against it, to write against expectation for what people are going to be thinking when they go to see a show and they see that it's by a Native playwright, and they see that it has Native actors. They might have a preconceived notion about what that's going to be. And I always try to play a little bit against that.
I want to again ask Patrick to come back to the play and then continue the conversation. But, when you were describing From Above, you described it in terms of the questions that the play is asking. I'm wondering, Patrick, can you give us a little moment in the play, or a scene, or give us a sense of how that question gets activated, or how you can feel it from the actor's point of view, or from the script's point of view?
Yeah, there's a lot I want to that's coming up for me in terms of, and not wanting to give things away if you're going to see them or hear the play later, but
I just want a teaser.
And also the follow-up question that I have too, but I'll start here, which is to say, and I shared this in the rehearsal process, which is the play deals with religion and organized religion, and I've been involved in different projects that broach that topic, and I shared my no matter how open I am and say that I am, I have my experiences in life where there was that little bit of cynicism that comes in of okay, you're right, here we go. Let's just forget about some childhood stuff and go then. But that's my experience, and I acknowledge that. But all of this is to say, and I mentioned this too, the first scene, and then this is also speaking to why I think the work that you're doing and why, matters so deeply on just the level of empathy and sincerity, is that it felt that quickly went away from me, because I was like, oh no, I'm listening to real people. I'm watching real people have an honest conversation from a place of, I didn't feel like there was some message that was sort of like being, forced upon me. Of like, that's, the most intense way to put it, but it just was, so that's to say, a compliment to your talent, but also, it made me question a lot of things. And so those questions of, where that's coming from in me to have that, I guess that sort of immediate feeling or cynicism, as I use that word. Yeah, so I don't know if that entirely answers, the question you were kind of bringing me into with it, but, again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. When somebody writes something really beautiful and layered, and that how it opens up the questions, like we could spend hours and hours and hours, and which is a great thing to figure out, because these characters are so layered, that I want to have more and more time with this play. And the characters specifically that I'm playing, there's so much deep, rich, it's so layered that I think you remember last night, even working, I had to stop and I was like, there's a lot here, in the best way to put it, of like, there's so many things to mine here and figure out about the history of these characters. So there's so many questions I still have in my head that I know may not even get answered by the time we do it tonight, and that's okay. But it's always really exciting to see, and hopefully that's okay, like stopping in the middle of rehearsal to be like, there's a lot here, and I want to like do it justice because of what you've written. So this kind of, if I want to follow up with this, is something, you were talking earlier about why art is so necessary. And so I wanted to start off with that compliment to you about how I think, we're purveyors of empathy, right, in a world right now that's kind of being low priority, to put it lightly. And I think that is, personally, this is me, like why we have art and why we continue it, and especially now, that's sort of our mission. And so I say that to say that's how I feel in reading your play and working on it is, that word I keep coming back to with cynicism doesn't exist. It's like, looking at people with all openness. And so that's my compliment to you. But and then I have this question of what is the best compliment you could get after your play is done or read or presented, or you could frame it as like a question or feedback or a thought that someone gives you, maybe you've had before, or something you desire.
Because I trained as an actor, and I started as an actor, and that's like kind of how I do my whole kind of artistic kind of process. Whenever I have to sit and watch a reading of my play or watch something I play, I just feel so like, I just want to be in the next room, just letting everyone else have hopefully a good time. I think like the best version of that could possibly happen is being like maybe like being in the room or being out of the room, but hearing like a couple of people really engaged in conversation, or really just talking about something in the play that really struck them as they're walking out. And it doesn't have to be directed, they could just be talking to each other, but just for like, if I'm thinking of like a compliment to me, like that's the biggest compliment to me, is that they're just really locked and engaged in what they just saw. Because I think of the best theater that I've seen that made me really just want to engage more with it even after it was done. And being in New York City, you see so much theater that can have that effect and maybe doesn't have that effect, but at the best that theater does, it just makes you really just take a moment after you see it to try and really think about what you just saw. That's the kind of best theater that I like, and I think that's kind of the best compliment to the writing that I could get.
That's great.
I do think theater is so unique among the arts because the way it constructs this whole like snow globe world that you're in, like it's a whole world. And I remember last spring, I think it was, seeing the Lehman play.
Oh, the Lehman
Is that what it's
trilogy.
called? The Lehman trilogy. And it was like a 3-hour play, and I did not want it to end. Like it was, there's something that happens, and when the lights come on and that world disappears, that you realize how intense the world that you were in had been created. And so, like, that's one of the tragedies of like COVID and like all of that shutdown, and what is so important about the live, world of the arts. So speaking of live worlds, I'm turning to the audience now because we do want to have some time for audience questions. Both of us still have some questions queued up if you're feeling shy, but do not be shy because we want to have time also for your voices and your questions. So we have about 15 minutes, I think, to continue the conversation. And I'm going to hand off my mic to go out to you.
Hi, good to see you, Drew. You've just talked about how theater is special and it was very impacted by COVID. And I think the next impact I see coming down the route is AI. And I'm wondering if maybe theater is more inoculated. Maybe it will have less of an impact on theater, maybe particularly native theater, but I'm wondering what you think. That's my question.
That's a great question. AI is everywhere now. It's pretty inescapable, I think, and it's one of the things that came up in the union strikes recently with the TV Writers Guild and the Actors Guild, because the actors were striking because part of the contracts for extras work and background work was studios were wanting to scan an actor and just have a digital copy of them so they didn't have to keep paying them. So it's very present in everything in the arts, and it's something that we're going to have to contend with of how to use it because it's not going away. It's only, from what I've seen and from what I keep seeing, is that it's only getting more accessible and easier to use. And because of that, it's going to affect writing at some point. I've seen, I won't say any names, but I have seen a playwright who will use AI to come up with a structure or a draft of something. And that's so antithetical to how I work because I try to not use anything that can influence what I want to just come out of my brain. I'm a very stream of consciousness kind of writer, and that's always been my process. And so having something that can add on to that, it just seems so antithetical to the act of playwriting and to the artistry that goes into it. But it's not going away. And so I think that, us as artists, we're just going to have to figure out how to best we can ethically navigate around it. Even if we don't use it ourselves, we may interact with people who do use it. And so we're going to have to figure out a way on how to navigate through it. I think, yeah.
Hi. How do you think that we can make more, because I'm from a really like a low income community, and obviously like nobody's talking about plays. In high school, like we thought plays were like lame, you know. It seemed like a very like uppity, like, oh, you're going to a play? That's so fun, huh? So how do you think we can change that mentality in like young people, specifically like from like low income areas?
Yeah, I think just by showing what else theater can be, because it's really not that when you get that kind of art form into people of color's hands. Then that's when you get really cool interactions with different material, and also just letting people know that it can be fun. It can be a good way to talk about community. It can be a good way to talk about problems in the community. I was a writing teacher, a playwriting teacher for a Native Youth Summer Camp, which you also took part of as well. But the year before that you did it, and we got it was all made up entirely of Native kids, Native youth, and who are from all over the place and from a lot of low income communities. And what I just did was I just got them just talking about the stuff that they were seeing in their community, the stuff that they were having problems with, or the stuff that they really needed to get out of themselves, that they could do that through writing. Like one young woman wrote about an incident where her mom was being discriminated against when she was going at the like grocery store, and it was in line for like food or something like that. And she just wrote down this whole monologue of all the things that she wished she would have said to that person who was discriminating against her mom. And so I think that it's not going to be perfect, because American theater is very white, just just being blunt. It kind of always has been. I mean, we still get taught Aristotle in all of our classes. That's kind of the given, is that you're going to teach Aristotle, and that's going to be the only thing that you do. But I think that there is an opportunity there for theater to be something a little different, because it is different than any other art form. You got live people who are in front of you, who are doing something that maybe can unlock something emotionally for the people in the community. So yeah, I don't know if you can exactly change communities' minds about it, but maybe you can just introduce something as a way of just showing them that it doesn't have to be the way that they have these preconceived notions about it.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Oh, thank you. No, I just wanted to add, too, that part of this equation is about the space of theater, and that our partners, Alter Theater, one of their models is like, we do community theater. We look for an empty storefront. We just need a box, and chairs. Like, we don't have these formal settings for theaters, because, as you're saying, like not every neighborhood has a theater that you go to, right? So there are a lot of, like Alter Theater, there are other theater companies around the country who will only go to the park or the parking lot behind the church or whatever it is, to do this ground up community theater. And I also think, you were talking about the Aristotelian structure and things like that. And I think one of the exciting things that comes out of the grassroots writers is people who actually haven't been trained. So they don't know what they're not supposed to do. They just do stuff, and it's way more exciting, right? Because they haven't had it shoved out of them. That's, of course, I am a professor and I believe in form too. But I do think that there's some beautiful meeting points that creates this amazing diversity and possibility.
Other questions?
Just based on the premise of the play, I feel like you talked about how you like pushing back against common perceptions. I feel like you're touching on some like nuance behind identity, and I kind of want to have like a little bit more of a personal question. But was there an identity that you're focusing on at the time that like called for the birth of that sort of play? And maybe does that differ from like your identity now, or the identity you're focusing on now?
Yeah, that's great. For me, so I didn't grow up religious at all. I didn't grow up religious in really any sense of the word. And so for me, the idea of identity being split, of having to choose, that's all really coming from my life being Native, but also being mixed. I'm Native and I'm also white. And so being mixed and then also being involved in theater and having to choose a lot between going to a Native event or going to a theater event or going to literally like choosing time between theater, choosing time between my Native community, and just kind of, all of these questions of like, what is more important at the end of the day? And of course, in the real world, we can be both. We can be, all of these things. But I just found it so fascinating, the idea of having to choose and what that does. And specifically because, the Catholic Church, as the Catholic Church has such a deep history with Native people. And there are a lot of Native people who are Catholic for many different reasons, one of which is the boarding schools, because a lot of the boarding schools were Catholic. So there's a lot of history there. And so just really diving in and exploring, why would Native people be Catholic today? Why would they choose to want to identify as both and have both of those things held tightly in themselves? And then the idea of the play is that they then have to choose which one is more important. But yeah, just as a launching off point, that personal kind of thing was the idea of, yeah, we do have to choose. We do have to choose every day of like, am I gonna, when I go into this room and I'm the only Native person in there, and everyone else isn't really going to identify you as being a Native person, how hard are you gonna stand up as a Native person? Or are you just going to let it slide and just be the theater playwright writer Drew instead of the Western Shoshone Native playwright Drew? So you always have to make choices like that in every day. And this is just more of an extreme kind of example of that. Because in playwriting and in my writing specifically, I like to always go for a bit of the extreme example to just give you a heightened idea of something.
I think we have time for one more question. We have two questions. We can do two questions.
This one's really quick. It's just specific to writing. How much like time do you chunk out a day to write when you're writing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I try to write just a little bit every day. I don't usually have a time limit for how much I write. I know that some other writers do, and that's fine. That works for them. I just try to write a little bit every single day. And then usually when the time comes and when you have a spark of something, a spark of an idea that you really need to get down onto the page, then I'll spend a few hours, just stream of consciousness, like I said, just going through the whole thing to just try and get a full idea out onto the page. So I'm not breaking it up into chunks or leaving that thought somewhere else. Like I'm just being able to just get it down. And I was lucky enough to work with Susan Lori Parks at NYU, who's a wonderful playwright. And what she's told us, which I've always taken with me, is that whenever you're out writing, or not out writing, but whenever you're out in the world or you're doing something or you're on your way to something or you're just taking a walk around and you have an idea for something, write it down immediately. Get that idea down as fresh as it possibly can be while it's still, fully molded into your brain. And you can go back later and check it and, extrapolate on it or whatever, but just get that fresh idea just right down wherever you are.
So how do you make a vision and then start making it into a play?
Yeah, it's a great question. I always write from images. So for this play, I had a very specific image for what I wanted the play to be. And then I wrote based off of that image. So I start with an image, and then I try to figure out why that image is in the play. For instance, I started this play with the image of a church in the desert, and it's alone in the desert. And it's a Gothic style church that you would see in, Arizona, Nevada, or whatever. And it's alone in the desert. And I knew that there was Native people in there, and I knew that it was hot, and I knew that it was kind of just alone in this kind of vast kind of universe. And then from there, once I had this image, then I had to figure out, okay, what's going on here? What are the characters here? What are the things here? And that led me to everything else.
Well, thank you so much for your questions. Thank you, Drew and Patrick, for this wonderful conversation. Thank you, everyone who's spending this time with us. Come back at 6 o'clock to see this incredible reading of From Above. And please join me in thanking Drew Woodson.